Likutei Sichos, volume 13, the second Sicha for Parsha Shlach. This Sicha is a Rashi Sicha. In this Sicha we're going to find, very interestingly, that the Rebbe actually not only repeats, but also accepts the premise of many of the Meforshei Rashi. Those are the various Meforshim that actually explain Rashi, that elaborate on Rashi, and many times help us better understand Rashi. There are times when the Rebbe brings Meforshei Rashi and takes a totally different course. In this Sicha, we're going to find that the Rebbe does accept their Pirush, however, he adds to it tremendously and gives us a totally different picture, but basing it on their premise. This in itself gives us insight as to what is expected of us, what we should do when we want to really properly learn a Rashi. What we should really do ideally is study the Rashi, not only learn the Rashi itself, but also look into the common Meforshim, the commentators of Rashi, on Rashi, and really get a better picture. Then try to, dissect the Rashi, analyze it like the Rebbe does. Let's jump right into it. B'pirushei al hapasuk v'hanoshim asher shalach Moshe losur sa'aretz vayashuvu vayalinu olav es kol ha'eda lohitzi diba la'aretz. In Rashi's pirush on the pasuk, where it says, quote, "And the people that Moshe had sent to scout the land, and they returned, and they ganged up everyone to complain, the entire community to complain, as they said gossip. They brought back a bad report about the land." Maitik Rashi quotes es hatevos, the words. This is the heading of Rashi. Vayashuvu vayalinu olav, the three words, and quote, "And they returned, and they made complaint, they ganged up on him." Umefarish, and Rashi explains. Ukesheshavu. Rashi is kind of explaining because he's putting us into the narrative. Rashi is as if filling in the blank spaces, so to speak, to help us read this verse in a way that it makes sense. Ukesheshavu mitur haaretz, and when they returned from the scouting of the land, hirimu olav es kol ha'eda, they got the whole entire congregation, they got him riled up on him. Who's him? On Moshe. V'hitzos diba, with saying, obviously, a bad report, saying lies, saying gossip about Eretz Yisrael, comma, Oisam ha'anoshim, those people, vayamusu, and they died, and Rashi leads us in, so to speak, into the next verse. And I would advise that you take a few moments, pause right now, study the verse, study the next verse, study the Rashi, and just look it over a few times so it becomes clearer, so it's easier to learn this. Going forward, Upirsha Mefarshim, the commentaries on Rashi explain. There's the common one, the Gur Aryeh. Sherashi bo lishloil. What is Rashi's objective? What's Rashi's purpose? It doesn't really seem like Rashi is saying anything amazing, any great novelty, anything that's earth-shattering here that, wow, we would never understand on our own. It's quite obvious. What Rashi tells us seems to be quite understandable from the pasuk itself. So the Mefarshim explain that Rashi bo lishlo, Rashi is actually coming to negate. He's coming to take away this premise, shaloi nefarish, that we should not explain that vayashuvu, that the word in the pasuk that says, quote, "And they returned," she'ameraglim chozru oidapam, that it means that the meraglim, so to speak, returned another time, pam shnia, the Rebbe writes a second time, laharim es bnei Yisrael al Moshe, to rile up the people on Moshe. So Rashi is telling us that this pasuk is really kind of repeating the narrative. It's emphasizing. It's like you would do in the olden days in a typewriter. If you wanted to emphasize something, if you wanted to highlight something, you went back and you typed over the same word. It's just repeating it to put some emphasis, to give us some better clarity on something. But not that they came back a second time. And as the Rebbe points out later, there are some Mefarshim that actually do explain that the Meraglim reappeared a second time and made a second wave of this, steering the people up against Moshe. But Rashi's trying to tell us, no, that's not what happened. Rather, Rashi is telling us, what is the Pirush of this pasuk? And when they returned, meaning that we know about, that they returned. Anybody that learned the parsha up to here already has learned that they returned. They came back with all this bad news, and they riled up the people against Moshe and Hashem. When they returned from the scouting of the land, from their visit to the land, and you see that Rebbe emphasizes these words in italics, which tells us when they had returned from their original return. This is not a second return, this is the original return. Then that's when they riled the people up. In other words, it's merely going back, repeating something that we already know. That Rashi is explaining, that was explained. That which is written in the pasuk, Vayeshuvu, Pirusha, what does it really mean? Kisheshavu mitura aretz, when they had returned from the land. The chol pasuk and the whole pasuk hu chazara al mashekasuv kvar, or mashenemer kvar, is only merely a repeat, and the Rebbe emphasizes the word a repeat on what was said already. And this is b'toir hagdama, as an introduction lemashekasuv acharkach, to what's written afterwards in the next pasuk. Vayomusa v'goymer, and they died in a terrible magefa before Hashem. Hainu shevanoshim asher Moshe v'goymer hem vayomusu v'goymer. That the pasuk is merely repeating this, almost like to recap and tell us those people that had returned, which we learned up till now, everything they did and all the terrible stuff they caused, they now were the ones who are dying in the next pasuk. Why is Rashi forced to explain it like this? Because because if indeed it is like some Farshim I told you say, that in fact they riled the people up against Moshe yet a second time, that they returned literally a second time, then the pasuk should have started straight with that, gone directly to that, and to write the following: Vayashuvu ha'anoshim. Vayilinu olav. Vayalinu olav. But and I'll explain. If it would have started with the word and they returned, and the people returned, but putting the emphasis on the return, starting the narrative with a return, then that would tell you, wow, there's another return here. But v'kivon de maschil. But since the pasuk in fact begins, how? V'ha'anoshim asher shalach Moshe vayoshu vayalinu. Mashma, this implies she'ikar hachidush akasuv hu b'negei leha'anoshim. That the whole point, the whole chiddush, the whole novelty of this pasuk, whatever this pasuk is trying to tell us, which we don't yet know for sure or entirely, but whatever it is, we do already know for one thing. From the fact that the pasuk begins with "and the people who returned," that tells us that the emphasis here is not on the return, not on something new, but rather going back or telling us something new or something informative about the people who had returned, or the people who had made the trouble, but the people. And that's what actually compelled Rashi to explain it this way. And that the ikar point, the main point of this pasuk is about to tell us something about the people, and not about all the other detail that's in this pasuk. And therefore Rashi explains that the people, and also as a parenthetical thing, he does point out what they did. But again, he emphasizes the people that Moshe had sent to scout the land. And when they had returned, which already happened before, and these people vayamusu. But the Rebbe says, so far so good. We have an idea of what compelled Rashi not to explain that they came and returned the second time, but rather to tell us that this is telling us something about the people who had already returned, namely the Meraglim. Avol, however, and the Rosh Tevis is al pi zeh. According to this, Tzadik Lamed Hey Beis, Tzorich Lahavin. We need to understand the following. And what do we need to understand? Aleph. Kol HaMisupar Kan. Everything that's described here, everything that's related here, Kfar Yodua Mimasha Kasav Lifneza, is already known from what's written before. There's no news in this. We know that these are the people who returned. We know that these are the people who scattered the land. We know these are the people who riled up the people against Moshe and Hashem. We know all of this, and then therefore it's obvious that the people in the next pasuk who died, they are the ones. They're the best or the worst candidates for this punishment. See, and in the packets, I'll paraphrase. If we were to explain that indeed they returned the second time, then it would make sense that we are repeating the whole thing, because it's telling us these people, because there's something new to tell us about these people. Okay? But now that we are just merely repeating or old stale news, which we already know by this point in the parsha, after the brackets, Harei kol hakosuv miyutar. The entire pasuk is superfluous, is extra. It's unnecessary, it's not needed. We know the Torah doesn't write extra psukim. And if merely as an introduction to the next pasuk, even if one was to kind of make some kind of argument that this is just to introduce us, to lead us into the next pasuk, that this is the reason why they died, or this is the people who died and why, this is all already understood from everything, the whole narrative up to this point from before. There's no need for it. In short, the question number one, it seems to be the entire pasuk is superfluous. There's no reason for the pasuk. Number two, lefize, according to this, if the whole thing that Rashi is coming to highlight, to explain, to clarify, is that they did not return a second time. Rather, this is talking about the original return, and it's merely recapping it and just leading us into the next pasuk. Then all Rashi had to quote in the Dibur HaMaschil. In other words, the only problematic word in this pasuk would have been Vayashuvu, ulefarish u'sheshavu mitur haaretz, and to explain Vayashuvu and when they returned. Not that they're returning now and when they had returned. That's it. Only one word in the Dibur HaMaschil and just a short Rashi, not as long as we have it. V'lo yoser, not more. Number three, my kuf mem lamed, my komash melon. Rashi b'mashikosuv harimu olav es kol ha'eda b'yitzayas diba. What is Rashi really telling us? What news is he breaking to us? What is he really telling us that we don't yet know in the words, quote, these people riled up on him, the entire congregation, by speaking their gossip, by saying their lies. Look into the pasuk. The pasuk says it clearly. We don't need Rashi to repeat the pasuk. All we need Rashi for, and Rashi's own objective is to clarify that which we may not understand on our own because it's not written clearly in the pasuk. It doesn't appear in the pasuk. This appears in the pasuk. Number four, Ma moisiv Rashi b'siyumai oisam anashim vayamusu. What is Rashi adding at the end of Rashi? What does really Rashi add with the words, quote, those people, and they died? Okay? Now, the rest we're going to paraphrase here and there. Okay? We're going to skip some parts. Okay? We're going to skip Ois Beis, and we're going to jump to Ois Gimel. Because in Ois Beis, the Rebbe does actually zero in and dissect another expression in Rashi, the Hitzayas Diba, but just time does not allow for us to really give it the attention that it deserves. So instead, we'll jump into the answer that the Rebbe gives on this question, these questions that we asked, and it'll be quite understandable and enjoyable. We'll come out with something, understanding this Rashi, really appreciating and how the Rebbe learns the Rashi. And again, remember what I said. The Rebbe said does not negate this pirush. Indeed, Rashi has to explain what it means when it says in the pasuk they returned, that it's not that they returned the second time, because like I said, there are those pirushim, there are those mefarshim who actually maintain that they returned the second time to rile them up again, but rather that this is talking about the original return. And then if you remember, if I had to sum it up in one sentence, well, what's the point of the pasuk? And the Rebbe will explain it. Habir b'kolze, the explanation, the clarification in all of this. Noisaf alanau, in addition to the above mentioned, where it says that Rashi, where we explained, that Rashi is here to negate that we should not say Vayeshuva means that they returned the second time, there is also, so to speak, that big elephant in the room, the bigger problem, not exactly how to explain the verse, as much as this whole verse is not needed. The whole verse is superfluous. And this is what Rashi comes to explain. That in the words of Hashem, when Hashem said to Moshe, if you recall, he said, Ad Mosai lo Edo haro hazois, that they are, how much do I take? How long would this terrible congregation, which is referring to the Meraglim, and that they're riling up on me, meaning on who? On Hashem. They're riling up the people on Hashem. They're getting the people to go against Hashem, which they indeed succeeded in doing. The people cried. The people were worried. The people were petrified, even though they should have believed in Hashem. So when Hashem spoke to Moshe, he complained about that fact. He bemoaned that. And so too, in reference to all the Yidden, when Hashem complains to Moshe and he says, what am I going to do with the Yidden? I want to destroy all of them because they're all complaining, they're all riled up against me being Hashem. But in this pasuk, something totally changes. Look at the pasuk. It says that the Meraglim, when they came back, what did they do? They riled the people up on him against Moshe. Against Moshe? Well, first of all, what's this thing about being riled up against Moshe? We know, number one, Moshe and Aaron were always together. Moshe and Aaron are the de facto leaders. So if you riled up against Moshe, you riled up against Aaron. So why only mention the fact that it was Olav? It should have maybe said Aleihem, that the problem is that they riled up the people against them, Moshe and Aaron, the two leaders. And moreover, I ask you, think about it. What is worse? What really would be more deserving of a punishment of death? The riling the people up against Hashem himself or against Moshe? True, going against Moshe is terrible. But that in comparison to the Aveira of going against Hashem? Why even mention that? Why is the pasuk even telling us the fact that they had succeeded in riling up the people against Moshe? And since Rashi is also explaining this already the Rebbe gives us an answer why the Dibur HaMaschil cannot just be Vayeshuv when they returned. Because Rashi is not, his objective is not just to explain the word Vayeshuvu. It's not just Vayeshuvu, that quote, and they returned itself, that needs clarification, that needs explanation. Rather, the entire pasuk. Everything here needs to be explained. And that's why in the Dibur HaMaschil he puts in the words Vayeshuvu Vayalinu Olav. And through what Rashi says, we're going to find out exactly what is happening over here, exactly what the pasuk is trying to tell us, and exactly why this pasuk is not superfluous, why it is indeed needed, and how it leads into the next pasuk. And with that we come to Ois Dalet. You see, there's really a big question hanging here. When you learn the whole story of the Meraglim, what do we really find out? What do we see? What happened? Just to give you a short recap of the narrative. The Meraglim go, they come back. They stir up this pot. They rile up the people against Hashem. And Hashem says, that's it. Enough. I had enough with everyone. With this congregation that is the 10 Meraglim and all the Yidden. I'm done. Oy, Moshe starts to daven. Moshe starts to beg Hashem to forgive the Yidden and it's not their fault. And then what are all the nations are going to say? Oh, Hashem couldn't handle, take it. All the things Moshe did, all the arguments he gave, and Hashem said, Salachti kitvarecha, I forgive. Well, they're going to die, but they're going to have a very good long life. over a span of a total of 40 years, no one's going to die before they're 60. It's a life. They're not going to live to 120 like Moshe, but they're going to live to 60. They're going to live almost to the time of going into Eretz Yisrael. And then they're going to die. But these Meraglim, the 10 Meraglim, true, they were the instigators. But somehow it seems like Moshe's tefillah, Moshe's power of tefillah escaped them. It didn't help them. Not only it didn't help them, but their punishment, their death was rapid. It comes out from the narrative, from all the psukim, that when they died, the Magefa that they died in was that day. It was swift punishment. I don't understand. Why? Why couldn't Moshe save them? Or at least delay it, postpone the punishment, give them a little breather, maybe they'll do tshuva, maybe some of them will realize the terrible mistake they made. Why did they die immediately? What happened? And this is where the entire pasuk begins to make sense. And this is what what Rashi is telling us, what Rashi helps us understand, that these people, namely the Meraglim, when they returned, they riled up the people against him, against Moshe. The fact that they riled up against the people against Hashem, of course they were deserving to be put to death. Of course they were deserving a terrible punishment. Just like, or similar to the rest of the Jewish people that deserved to be punished because they spoke out against Hashem. They acted out against Hashem. But in this pasuk, the pasuk is explaining to us why Moshe didn't save them. Why Moshe, actually, not only he could not save them. Why could he not save them? Because Moshe Rabbeinu could not daven for them. Because they riled the people up against Moshe. They actually declared their animosity to Moshe. They declared their disbelief in the power of Moshe. And because they did that, Moshe's tefillah could not help them. Moshe's tefillah could not save them. Moshe, not only he couldn't save them, but the fact that what they did is almost midah keneged midah. It's a measure for a measure. When they doubt Hashem, so to speak, Hashem wants to punish them, Moshe intervenes. In other words, almost like a third party, if there's such a thing, chas v'shalom, outside of Hashem, but there isn't. But in a sense, the third party intervenes. But when you attack the third party, in other words, he is already also now, so to speak, a defendant, a problem here. He's in the mix. There's no one else to daven for them. They brought upon themselves their own punishment, their own death. And this is where the whole Rashi, the whole pasuk begins to make sense. What is it that the pasuk is telling us? Not just recapping the known narrative. It's emphasizing something. You remember these people that had returned then? The people that Moshe sent? And they returned and riled the people up against Moshe. So now we get a new angle that has not yet been portrayed or illustrated yet in this story. Up until now, we know that they riled the people up against Hashem. Now we're finding out that they also riled them up specifically against the leader of the generation, specifically against Moshe. And because they did that, Moshe could not save them. And that's what Rashi says, Oisam ha'anashim, those people that had riled up against Moshe, and he leads us into the next pasuk, where it says they died before Hashem for what they did to Hashem. And now we have the clarity. The fact that they died, the fact that they were punished, was because of what they did. They riled the people up against Hashem. They exhibited disbelief in Hashem, distrust in Hashem's ability to take us into Eretz Yisrael. But the fact that it happened right away, moreover, the fact that Moshe could not save him, that's what this pasuk is telling us, because Vayalinu Olav. Now everything comes together, everything makes sense. And all the questions that Rebbe asked, if you go through them, 1, 2, 3, 4, they all get answered one by one. And this brings us to a wonderful Hira, and this is an Ois Vav, Hira Ba'avoda. Not only did we learn a Rashi, but like everything else in the Torah, that by learning the Rashi, we get a clarity in the Torah. What is Torah? Torah Milashon Hira. It gives us a directive, a direction, a teaching in life, how we should live our lives. The Torah is not here to just merely tell us stories and give us some more details just to add some little flavoring to the stories. That's not what the Torah's objective is, because that's not what it is. It's not a history book, and it's certainly not an entertainment book. What is the Torah telling us? Why does the Torah want us to know this detail? That not only they died for what they did to Hashem, but these people died because these are the people who returned and riled up against Moshe. Because it says in the Tikkunei Zohar that there is an ispashtusa de Moshe b'chol dora v'dora. Every generation has its Moshe. Every generation, and by the way, the Rebbe adds, you don't even have to rely on Kabbalah. Even the Gemara says there is no generation that there isn't someone like Moshe. Meaning, every generation has its Nasi Ador, every generation has its Moshe. And this Moshe's job and objective is to care about each and every single Jew. As we know in the story where Moshe was chosen specifically because of that, because he cared for each and every individual lamb that was there under his care. Moshe does care. Of course, many are capable. And the Rabbi even adds, if we all know the origin, the root of the mitzvah of davening, we are all obligated to pray for ourselves. Meaning, the mitzvah of prayer is that when one is in a rut, one is in a problem, one is in need of something, one has a must, an obligation to turn to Hashem and ask Him for our needs, to express our emunah in Hashem, to ask Him for what we need. However, we do need the power of the Moshe in the generation. He really knows how to daven. He davens for the people, he cares for them. So, because he cares for them, he is the Nasi. What is the Nasi? He is the Rabbi, the Rosh B'nai Yisrael. Just like in a body, whenever there's pain in the body, the head feels it. Literally, who prays? The head. You use your mind, but using your heart, but the words are being said. You're begging, you're crying out to Hashem with your head, with your mouth. The head feels the pain. The Rosh B'nai Yisrael feels the pain. Moreover, even the individual's prayer, when one is already praying, in order to truly and properly connect with Hashem, the Rosh, the Moshe, the Nasi, he is like the portal that really connects it to Hashem. And here, when the Yidden sinned, they were so distant from Hashem. And yet, what do you see? Moshe Rabbeinu davened. And his tefillos actually helped. It helped. It actually succeeded in not only prolonging their lives, but for some of them prolonging their lives for almost 40 years. And a good life, the Rebbe points out. They had the well of Miriam, they had the man, they had the clouds of glory protected them. It wasn't like a diminished life. It was a perfect life, just like anybody else. It's just when the time came, they passed away. So having a tzaddik in the generation, and knowing that the tzaddik davens for us, that is the lesson of this Rashi. That is the lesson, the purpose of this whole pasuk, to tell us that the Moshe davens for you. But of course, and chas v'sholom, no one should ever bring this on themselves. You need to have some connection to the tzaddik, and not like these Rishayim, these Meraglim, who actually sever their connection with the Rosh, the Moshe of their generation, and the same applies for all generations.